So what is this thing? This is a little bit complicated to explain, but after I did Age of Ultron, I decided to go on to another event that I'd missed out on called Secret Invasion. And so I went back and started working on that. This was in January of 2019. Yeah, it's been a little while. Well, I worked on it for about 5 months, and then something broke, because something is always breaking around here, and I didn't get back to it again. Fast forward to a week ago when I was planning to work on Dark Frontier being restored, and discovered that it was in fact broken. I was going to have to reconstruct a great deal of it in order to put out a new version of that for YouTube. Then, a few days ago, Monica Magica broke. Given that I had spent the last several months putting it back up again, I was a little peeved, and didn't much feel like wrestling with Dark Frontier being broken. And then Friday came around and I realized I had no show for today. So I did what I often do when that happens. I dig through my old bullshit file and see if there's something that I never actually posted here, and lo and behold, Secret Invasion pops up. And I thought, yeah, I never did finish that, and I probably should. Why don't I post this right now, and I can continue to fill it out in the months ahead? And then I saw Disney Plus is actually releasing their Secret Invasion show next week. Well, this will give me a chance to look like I'm shamelessly hopping on a bandwagon. I don't care. The mere fact that I'm giving you this 2-minute prologue to this video should tell how little I care, in fact. So anyway, as this goes along, you may hear some very strange references because of the fact that this was made in 2019 rather than today, and I don't feel like editing it because God knows what's going to break next. So I hope you enjoy this introduction to Secret Invasion. The series that can really be considered a prologue to Secret Invasion is actually the Illuminati. And this time I'm going to be looking at that 5-issue series, even though only the first and last ones really have to do with that event. The idea comes from the hero's realization in the wake of the Kree-Skrull War and its effects upon the Earth, that they had enough knowledge individually to thwart the problem if only they had pooled that information. And so Iron Man, Mr. Fantastic, Professor X, Black Bolt, Doctor Strange, and Namor formed the group. Black Panther declined. In our first issue, the 6 of them have decided to head to the Skrull planet and make clear their displeasure, even while the subordinate insists that the only conclusion from what happened is that a frontal attack repeated would be doomed as well. But the issue is obviously moot as Black Bolt destroys their ship with the power of his voice. But it's a short-lived victory. While they sent the message that the superpowered individuals of Earth can wreak havoc, they also discovered that you can't blow up an important command ship and then make an easy getaway. Their own ship is shot down, and they are all subjected to rigorous and torturous examinations. It's Stark that manages to escape, since, as the only one whose powers are, well, in a big metal suit, he's not subjected to experimentation and not treated like he's any kind of threat. So they're rather surprised when their attempt to trick him with a fake Avengers rescue is met with his fists flying and overwhelming them, allowing him to free the others. They're horrified at the sight of what's happened to Richards, but they should probably get out of here rather than trying to get even. 6 guys versus a whole planet isn't terribly good odds, even for them. This time they use an image of Galactus arriving to terrify the pursuing ships, an irony given the fate of the Skrull homeworld. But all this seems to have played into the hands of the Skrull King, who wants whatever the hell his plan is. He's going to move it forward anyway. This issue assumes knowledge of the Illuminati and being able to put it in context, such as this being when Iron Man needed the suit because of his heart. Like the rest of this series, the issue has to serve as a kind of standalone coda to an existing story, if you will. The events are essentially what happened after, and then it ends. This one is pretty good, an insight into the Skrulls' view of the events more than that of the humans, which sets it apart from the rest, which tend to look at this from the Illuminati point of view. The image of Reed Richards is quite good. But considering the horror of its reveal, it might have been a mistake to show what was happening so clearly to the readers. It probably should have had him just off panel so that we discover what was happening at the same time that the others do. The primary purpose of the issue, though, is to show what a mistake the Illuminati made. That by going, not only did it not alter Skrulls' view of the Earth, because even they admit the Skrulls won't let this stop them, but they have unwittingly helped advance the Skrull plot. Thus, the Illuminati is perhaps a good idea, but nevertheless could make mistakes. And because it's 6 important Earth heroes doing it, those mistakes can cause a lot of damage. Issue 2 is timely for us in the real world because it involves the Infinity Stones, or Infinity Gems as they're referred to in the comics. As you likely know, in the Infinity Gauntlet events, Thanos gathered the 6 stones together and used them to give himself godlike powers, and then killed half the population of the universe with a snap of his fingers. He eventually lost the gauntlet, and by order of the Living Tribunal, they were no longer supposed to be used together again. But that's all ancient history. Yet Richards has appeared at this meeting with a soul gem that he has acquired, thanks to She-Hulk, who took it off of Titania. This actually happened in the pages of She-Hulk, yes. The implication is clear. If someone whose talents begin and end with punching someone can get their hands on one of these, then the cosmos is screwed. And even leaving that aside, the forces that regularly struggle over them do so with little regard to how it affects the Earth. So Reed Richards took it upon himself to gather all of the stones, though he only has 3 at the moment. The others are understandably aghast, as even one of the smartest humans who has ever lived having them is still like an infant with a hand grenade. But Richards is determined to do this, so the others go along with it. That'll make it easier because each time you get a gem, you make the next one harder to get, so they're going to get the next 2 simultaneously. Doctor Strange, Xavier, and Namor will get the Mind Gem, and Black Bolt, Stark, and Richards the Reality Gem. This does not go very well. It's only thanks to Black Bolt's suggestion to use the rest of the gems that Richards is able to save Iron Man from the Reality Gem, and the Mind Gem is barely contained. With that, Richards can draw on the Time Gem from where it is adrift. I guess the being harder doesn't apply in this case. It's a buy 5, get 1 free option. Well, Uatu the Watcher shows up to scold Richards for being such an ass, and Richards explains that his plan was to will the gems out of existence, but that doesn't work. So instead, he gives 1 to each of them, to guard and ensure that no one can take them and reassemble the gauntlet. But the implication is that he only is capable of making this decision thanks to the mental prodding of Professor X. This issue is interesting. It reminds us of the fact that Titania was able to acquire a gem, and yet with each one they become more difficult. But it's like the gems want to be found, but only to be assembled by someone who will make good use of the power that they unlock. But as far as the issue, it continues the theme of the first one. On the one hand, together this incredibly weird team of heroes are capable of accomplishing incredible things together. But also, it means that they're playing at a level that they're unprepared for. They brought together items of such incredible power, but are really not fit to use them, and so have made them easier to acquire compared to where they had been. Compared to pulling one back from the frayed edges of reality, taking it from a billionaire investor isn't going to be quite so hard. The Illuminati are here to try to prevent problems, but instead they keep making them worse. Issue 3 is the weirdest one yet, as it goes all the way back to the original Secret Wars. In that story, a powerful being called the Beyonder created a battle world, and then brought heroes and villains from Earth to fight on it. This was then followed by Secret Wars 2, when the Beyonder came to Earth in human form. Secret Wars was popular for 2 reasons. The black costume for Spider-Man was introduced, and it was the first mega crossover for Marvel. Secret Wars 2 was not terribly popular, and for good reason, leaving aside the enormous number of crossover issues. This storyline is in fact the one where Kitty Pryde retaliates to being called Mutie with the N-word. I'd mentioned that on Discovery. So those of you who enjoy popcorn while watching Nerddom Burn can go read that. The Beyonder was previously stated to be a mutated cosmic cube, but Bendis decides here that the Beyonder is, in fact, an Inhuman who's also a mutant, and thus where he gets his great power. Now, Professor X has picked up him on Ceres, so he thinks maybe they should go out and check him out. Iron Man is absent from this particular outing. I guess the Infinity Gem incident was enough bullshit for him for 1 week. So they head out there, watching a recreation of Secret Wars 2 unfolding on an artificially maintained version of Manhattan, complete with guys like Power Man to give it the vibe of the time. Anyway, Namor is banking on divine right being the start and end of their solution. Although being a king himself, his assumptions are a bit biased. Nevertheless, the Beyonder bows before Black Bolt and wants to know how he can help his mighty king. Well, everyone keeps going on about how he has to stop doing all this stuff, and the rationale that they offer is it's unnatural, which is really rich coming from Mr. Fantastic. This is a guy who can stretch like a rubber band and invents things that mess with the laws of nature all the time. It's like a time when the president of Apple said that the free market doesn't work. He presumably reached that conclusion because he has to shovel money out of the way to get to the toilet. The Beyonder tries to show that he can make a better world, such as by letting Doctor Strange get into a three-way and Namor to have an army to declare war on the surface world. But finally he's told in no uncertain terms that he has to obey his king and leave. And he sort of does, but not really, and it doesn't matter. This origin story was thrown out later on anyway, so there is no consequence. The story can be interpreted as a continuation of the theme of how the Illuminati can accomplish much, but are operating at a level beyond their abilities. But this issue is unimpressive, bringing back and retconning a villain that no one had given a damn about for nearly 2 decades, and going nowhere with him. Illuminati 3 is the answer to a question no one was asking, and yet is giving an unsatisfying answer. I think this was simply because Bendis had the idea of an inhuman mutant and figured this was the best slot to fit it in. Such a character would be of such power it would be too disruptive to unleash into the present continuity, so it's applied retroactively to someone who did. All I can say is Secret Wars 2 needed a coda like a unicycle needs an airbag. This is an idea that sounds questionable and proves that, yeah, it really was. Issue 4 is mostly about the group discussing their love life. No, really. I won't even get into it, other than to say that Tony Stark's naivete about sex and marriage is rather uncharacteristic. You only need watch television to know that marriage does not mean 24/7 access to tail, and if Tony thought that, he'd get married. I mean, he's a problem solver after all. But there is an actual reason for this get-together, and that's to address a new problem. Marvel Boy, a Kree who declared war on the Earth and appeared in a limited edition series by Grant Morrison years earlier before getting tossed into the Cube, the big supervillain prison. There's concern about having the Kree pissed off at Earth, so after they're done discussing their lady problems, the Illuminati decide to use the carrot and the stick. Namor is the stick, which means he gets to beat the kid up. As ruler of 3/4 of the Earth, he takes personal umbrage if someone declares war on it. Plus, he likes to hit people. The carrot is an explanation of the relationship between the Kree and the Earth, that the Kree came here as protectors, not invaders, that the Inhumans are their descendants, in fact, and that declaring war on the Earth is effectively declaring war on what the Kree stand for. And that he should learn from the original Captain Marvel's example, of how he didn't look at the world and see what was wrong with it, but saw it for what it could potentially be. Now this is a metaphor for Marvel Boy himself, who likewise has problems, but could potentially be a hero instead. This shows the Illuminati finally getting something right for once, steering people onto the right path. This is right in their wheelhouse, and so it's something that they can easily manage, to persuade someone to be a better person, to convince him that he can be a hero. And they tell him to do so by earning his freedom as a first step. This issue contrasts nicely with the previous two, as both of those are about someone using great power to alter reality. But what we see is most effective is to change hearts and minds, to transform the world through hope. This story is part of the reason I feel this series can be considered a prologue, as the events of the issue will indeed be seen during Secret Invasion, even though it's the first and the last ones that are directly involved in that plotline. Our 5th and final issue is set in what was then the present, during a time when the Registration Act led to opposing superhero teams, even different groups of Avengers. One with Iron Man on it, and the other with Doctor Strange. So the reunion is a complicated affair. Doctor Strange has chosen to be there in spirit. And when Doctor Strange does that, you should take it literally. Everyone's a bit surprised at being reunited. There was an issue with the Hulk recently that made this whole arrangement rather awkward, but Tony felt that it was warranted given what he's got in his bag here. He has something that Doctor Strange's team of Avengers found: the dead body of Elektra. Normally that wouldn't be anything more than a tragedy, but upon dying, Elektra turned into a dead Skrull. Tony sees it as a sign that they're at war. Namor thinks that that's paranoia, but Tony rattles off all of the bad things that have happened: the decimation, the Civil War, problems with Atlantis. It suggests that they're being manipulated from within. What's particularly troubling about that is that this something can't be detected by enhanced mutant senses, magic, or even a spider sense. But Black Bolt is the one that shakes them all up by speaking to them, something that he can't do. Well, not without depositing their lifeless bodies on the next continent. Yep, Black Bolt is a Skrull. He completely fooled them all, even Iron Man's sensors and Professor X's telepathy. And there is a fight. They barely win it. And then Skrull reinforcements show up, and Tony is forced to break out his super-duper gotcha last move. It takes them out, but the implication of the whole thing is clear. First, the Skrulls learned enough from their capture back in issue 1 to set all this in motion. And 2, there's absolutely no way they can tell these Skrulls apart from the real deal. Not even with mind reading, not even with advanced technology, nothing. As a result, nobody can trust each other. Nothing personal, it's just logical. So they all go their separate ways to set up the secret invasion. The issue continues the theme of the series, at least the overall one. The Illuminati are playing at a level that they're not ready to operate at. They defeat the Skrulls that know of their meeting, but barely, and leave with their unity shaken. In retrospect, all of this should be no surprise. These people, after all, are not representatives of the most powerful of Earth's heroes. They're just the leaders of the most important teams, or are standouts in their area anyway. So while they make an interesting team, they're not bringing the best of the best to the table here. Which makes sense. Good decision makers are hardly going to be the biggest guns on a team. Of course, you can argue that they're hardly showing the best of judgment throughout this series. They make quite a number of calls that could arguably be considered to make the situation worse. And not just with this. As Doctor Strange notes, the reason the new Avengers didn't tell Iron Man about Elektra was because many of them suspected he was a Skrull, given how he'd been behaving during the Civil War incident. Inaction can be deadly, but sometimes what's even worse is calling attention to yourself to someone who can sweep your defenses aside with ease. Overall, the series is certainly enjoyable for the novelty of the situation, and there is entertainment in seeing the secret cabal that controls the world repeatedly getting kicked in the nuts. Also, unlike Age of Ultron, the story deconstruction is absent. Bendis has to actually finish his story inside a single issue, and so needs to make each panel count, instead of filling it out with art for the trades. It's a welcome change. This series also effectively sets the stage for the coming of the secret invasion, leading to me to be cautiously optimistic about it. But as a standalone series, there are a couple speed bumps along the way, and especially with the Beyonder, they really were things that, did we really need to dredge this back up again? We'll have to see how things shake out next time.